Hello and welcome to Craig on Cars. In today's instalment we're going to be having a close look and a drive of this 1972 Citroen SM, having a chat with the owner and finding out a little bit more about the car.
Hi, my name's Steve. This is a 1972 Citroen SM. I've had this car now for around 2 years. Andrea, my wife, and I went to have a look at it and just fell in love with it. It's always been in my consciousness as a petrol head that this is an interesting car. It has a Maserati engine, hydro pneumatic suspension, so there's a lot to like about it in that sense, but the actual design of it, the look of it, is what really sold it to me. I just love the different lines of the car and the quality of it inside and out. The interior is just as nice as the exterior. Your beautiful leather seats, really comfortable, and of course that suspension system means that you're really just floating along on air. You can do long distances very easily. We've just done the Swiss Alps and back. We went over probably 6 or 7 mountain passes up to probably 8,000 feet, fully loaded in 35 degrees of heat or more, and it absolutely was perfect for the job. It's very easy to drive around twisty roads as well. It has this amazing self-centering steering, and what that means is that if you're turning around a corner and you let go, the wheel will spin back at some speed to center, as opposed to just gently rolling back as a modern car would. And it means that you can drive very quickly through hairpin bends, for example, on Swiss mountain roads. The Maserati engine is fantastic. It's a V6 2.7. It was really designed for this car, and it's not overly powerful. You know, around 200 horsepower. Well tuned. This is a fuel injected car. The earlier ones were carburettor, but the fuel injected gave it a little bit more power, and it's more than enough. It has a top speed, I think, of 140 miles an hour, but it's really the mid-range torque and the go is fantastic. It's a manual. It has a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is perfect for the car. It's left-hand drive. They never made any right-hand drives. This is actually a car that was made for the Swedish market. They only sold 24 in Sweden, so it's pretty rare. One of the dealers in the UK did do a couple of right-hand drive conversions, but I don't think it worked particularly well. So, you know, they are a left-hand drive car, but if you're going to go touring, of course, as we did, then that's perfect. So yeah, we use it a lot. We intend to use it for touring, and it's probably the best car we own for that kind of thing.
It's great to see such a beautiful and iconic car being used for its intended purpose. So what does the SM badge stand for? And feel free to debate in the comments below. Some say the S comes from Project S, which was the code name Citroen gave to the car during development, and the M for Maserati, so the car is commonly referred to as the Sports or Series Maserati. However, it's much more likely to follow the naming convention of the earlier Citroen DS, La DS, meaning Goddess, so SM being Sa Majesty or Her Majesty. What started in the early 60s as development of a sporty variant of the DS ended up with the launch in 1970 at the Geneva Motor Show of a thoroughly engineered new car in its own right. A true GT car, it came equipped with a 2.7 or 3-litre V6 provided by Maserati, which Citroen had bought in 1968. Unfortunately, production of the SM was short-lived, ending in 1975 shortly after Citroen went bankrupt. In that 5 years, just under 13,000 were produced, so objectively the car was a commercial failure in period, no doubt due to such things as the high price tag, the 70s fuel crisis, US regulations on bumpers, and the general public just not quite getting what the car was about. But none of this detracts from how innovative and groundbreaking the car was. Unusually aerodynamic, hydrodynamic self-leveling suspension, those swivelling headlights, variable assisted power steering. It was the first car to have rain sensor wipers, the world's fastest front-wheel drive car, and the car with the shortest braking distance. Citroen really did produce a vehicle that was a symbol of optimism and progressive technology, similar to its contemporary, the Concorde. A car that looks like it comes from the future, even today, some 50 years after it was launched. So let's go for a ride and see what the car's like out on the open road.
So is this your first time in an SM?
This is my first time in an SM, and the first thing that strikes me is how cool the interior is. It's really, it's unique, isn't it?
It's
very French.
Yeah, it is very French, but it's pretty functional. But it's nice and easy. You know, heating and ventilation is easy. The aircon comes on when you turn the fan on. You've just got oil, water temperature, oil temperature, and fuel. So nothing particularly fancy. This is quite clever. The warning system on the dash. So there's a large red light in the middle which says stop. And
is that something wrong with the engine? Or?
And then it will, another light will come on at the same time to tell you why you need to stop. So it could be that you've lost pneumatic fluid pressure, or your brakes have lost pressure, or the engine's overheating, or there's ice warning. There's a number of different reasons why it might tell you that you need to stop. A bit like a modern car, you know, with the warning lights to say, you know, stop now or go to a dealer, you've got a problem.
Yep.
So given that it's 50 years old, that was quite advanced.
Of course, because this car was designed from the early 60s, wasn't it?
So yeah, it was designed in the 60s, so back then...
The engine sounds fabulous.
Yeah, so the Maserati it's not particularly loud on this car. Some people put louder pipes on it, but you can just hear that, especially when the revs pick up.
Yeah.
As you can tell, it's quite smooth. There's not a lot of noise in here. You can generally have a conversation at quite high speeds. So it's very much designed as a GT. And you don't really feel much of the road imperfections.
It is very smooth.
It's a very smooth ride, and I can't think of any other car as old as this, classic car, that gives you the same quality of ride. Yeah, possibly Rolls Royces and things like that, but of course they use Citroen suspension.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this suspension system was essentially carried over from the DS. And it was the same system.
Exactly the same system, and it shares some components with the DS.
Yeah, and that was what was licensed to Rolls Royce for the cylinder.
And they licensed it, yeah. Very clever system. Not particularly complicated. A lot of people do worry about how complicated these cars are, but the suspension system on this car is the same as the DS. It was well proven for decades before the SM came out.
Yeah.
So of course all the garages and dealers knew how to fix it. It's not a big deal. So that wasn't really for the French market, certainly nothing new at all. Of course over here or elsewhere, garages that were more used to fixing Morris Minors or midgets or TRs or whatever they were fixing, this was really technical.
It must have seemed like light years ahead.
Absolutely.
And of course there's plenty of features on this car that even on modern cars today are only starting to become standard things, like the steering, variable steering. The Golf GTI has got that, but that's so that's a modern car.
Speed sensitive
50 years ahead.
steering, swivelling headlamps as you turn around the corners. Yeah, these were in their day very advanced features, and as you say, some cars are just catching up now. Trying to think, there's probably, I keep discovering features on the car that I think are pretty cool.
Yeah. Is there one feature in particular that you think is that you like?
Do you know? I think the steering system is probably, as a driver, the most interesting. It has really very precise steering and very fast steering. So you can, a flick of the wrist and you're round roundabouts or sharp bends, corners in the road, So as someone who likes driving, it is a real driver's car. It's designed to be able to hustle it. If you were driving through Paris, you could hustle this through the streets very quickly. It'll turn on a sixpence. It's probably got a similar turning circle to a London taxi. Compared to other cars we've got, like the Aston, you know, which you really do need a roundabout if you want to turn around. This is very, very interesting. For example, the geometry of the car, so it has wider track at the front than the back, so the wheels are further apart.
Yeah, I noticed that.
On the front to the back, so it gives it that very odd narrow at the back, wide at the front look, which is like a bit
teardrop sort of.
Teardrop, yeah. And of course this has very efficient aerodynamics, so it's got the cam tail design with that sort of cut off tail.
And again, modern cars like the Prius and the Honda have got a similar hybrid sort of car that they've got similar designs in the back.
Yeah.
And again, Citroen were 50 years ahead.
Yeah, so I can't remember the coefficient of drag on this car, but I do know it's very, very low.
Yeah.
So again, why they didn't need to have excessive power, because of the low drag and the teardrop design of the car. 200 horsepower is perfect for what you need to do.
I particularly like the gear. Sort of
everyone loves that. It's
when you were changing gear, the sound it gave.
Yeah, it's very, very positive. You get a bit of a clunk as you go into each gear, which I like. It's got everything about the car I've discovered has this kind of carved from solid feel about it. Yeah. So look at the door handles. You know, you could smash windows with those. Everything is really, really solid, well engineered. So it's quite a heavy car, but I think that putting a bit of weight into a car gives it stability and it gives it smoothness on long journeys.
And this was intended to be a GT, wasn't it? So it was all about the cruising.
Yeah, I think a lot of modern cars, they're so light, they bounce around a bit, they blow around in the wind. High winds, crosswinds, this thing doesn't really even notice them.
And the seat is actually really supportive.
Yeah, so the seats are really comfy. On the driver's seat, you have two separate systems for adjustment. So the angle can be leaned back, or so the front can be raised or lowered, as well as going back and forth, and the rake adjustment. So multiple adjustments. You can get the front seat exactly where you want it, and they are, as you say, they're really, really comfortable and supportive. So you can see why on a long journey you wouldn't really get that tired. There's no vibration and noise really. And they thought about the ergonomics. So on the steering wheel here, I can do pretty much everything on my left hand. So I've got the indicator here, one pull for town horns, two pulls for country horns. So you have town and country horns as standard. And if I push the same
French horn as well.
Yeah. If you push the same lever, you flash the headlights. So it's all fingertip control. So it's designed for the driver. Everything's kind of there. No major effort. Everything's very light touch.
Yeah. So this car started life in Sweden. Was it already in the UK when?
So it's already in the UK when I bought it. The chap who brought it into the country had two, and he decided to keep his other one and sell this one. So yeah, it was already over here.
That V6 sounds delightful. I heard a story that when the Citroen first went to Maserati, saying we want to put your V8 engine in the car, but due to the French tax laws it couldn't be above a 2.8 litre, so take two cylinders off it. Maserati weren't too happy to begin with.
I believe that's right, yeah.
Eventually went along with the instruction from head office, and
I believe they did toy with the idea later in the production run of a V8 SM, and there is one in existence somewhere, and I believe it has a perspex bonnet so that you can see the engine. It was done as obviously as a pre-production concept, and I think at the time they were playing with that, they were already in severe financial difficulty, and Citroen were in trouble, so it never happened. But a V8 version would have been interesting, but I still think, you know, you could tune this engine quite a lot. So if you really wanted to be up towards 250, 260 horsepower, which for a two-seater GT is a good output, you could easily achieve that. But I've never found it short of power for what it is, which is a fast GT.
You recently did your Switzerland tour. Did it get a lot of attention?
Yeah, a lot of love from the French. Well, everybody really. I think certainly car people can instantly tell what it is. And a lot of people would come up and say, oh look, my granddad had one of those, or my dad had one of those, or a DS. Of course, a lot of people confuse it and they say, oh, it's a DS, and I have to correct them and say, no, you're close, but it's not a DS. But of course, people were familiar with the DS. They were all on our roads in Britain for years. Everyone knew somebody who had a DS, whereas the SM, of course, was a different thing. I mean, the price of the SM, I believe it was around £7,000 in the mid-70s, which was a huge amount.
It was a lot more than sort of the equivalent Jag XJ6.
Yeah, exactly. So you had to really want a Citroen, as well as be able to afford one. So there weren't many on British roads. I believe around 300 were sold in Britain. So yeah, quite a rare sight. Whereas I'm sure they sold a lot more DSs.
But even in France, I'd imagine this was a rare car, because they only made 12, just under 13,000, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, not which you think about today's production volumes, it's not a lot. That was for global. I mean, they sold quite a lot in the US. They had to mess around with the headlight design at the front because swivelling headlamps weren't allowed in US law. And of course, they had to have an automatic.
And then the US further complicated things for Citroen when they brought in their plastic bumpers rule in sort of 73, 74, and Citroen had to pull out the US market at that point, I think.
As did a lot of people, I think, because they everything got tough, didn't it? Emissions got tough. Designs of the car had to change.
It's a lovely place to be, isn't it? You look back, and the Louvre in the rear window.
Yeah, so I really like the Louvres. They were a period accessory, and the factory that made them back then is still making them, called Gradulux in Perpignan, South France. And I ordered these from them a couple of months ago, and I love them. I mean, they're not brilliant for seeing out the back. In fact, you can see pretty much nothing out the back, but I love the look of them. So I live with that. I live with that. I've got good door mirrors.
What a fabulous experience. Thank you so much to Steve, the owner of this car, for showing us around. And if you've enjoyed watching today, please do subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you soon with some more exciting and cool cars. Thank you.